Hey, I recorded this video that you're about to watch about a year ago with my friend Wmpyr, and everything got really crazy in my life. I broke my ankle. My son was in the hospital, and everything kind of went crazy. And I thought I had edited and finished this video and got it up on my art channel, and then I realized that I didn't. And then I found out just recently that Wmpyr's dad passed away. And so I just kind of wanted to finish this video up and get it out and tell him that I'm thinking of him and praying for him and his family, and I just hope that you guys get something out of this because he is such a good teacher, and I've learned so much in the past probably decade from his YouTube channel. So here's the Wmpyr interview that's been long awaited. Question.
Oh,
Hey, welcome to the Academy of Renaissance Thinking. I'm here with my friend Wmpyr, and we're going to have another discussion today about probably brain development and martial arts and who knows where the conversation might lead us today. But I do actually have a question that I was thinking about running by you because I've got a new piano student.
oh,
The kid is like maybe 10 years old or something like that. And I asked him, he was really having a hard time getting his left hand to do anything. And I think we kind of talked about this last time about macro movements versus micro movements.
okay.
Where the big strikes and then the little stuff.
Yeah.
But like, what kind of advice would you give this kid to help develop his left hand to kind of catch up with his right? And also, a secondary question is, how much time do you think it's going to take a kid like this to actually, if he works every day, to get that right or the left hand up a lot better with his right?
Yeah, that depends on the individual. Hard to say without seeing, but what you just said right there about first you need to know the difference between the macro and the micro. And
Mm-hmm.
FMA, we focus on the macro right away.
Yeah, right off the bat.
Yeah, we don't start with knife. We start with a long stick, which is macro,
Mm-hmm.
and from there, I would say, dude, just focus on your right hand
Mm-hmm.
and get the right hand down, and then the right hand teaches the left hand.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's true.
that's
What do you
do it. Yeah.
What do you think about, like, you've studied other martial arts too?
Mm,
In my thinking of martial arts, when you're getting into the micro movements,
mm.
you're talking about things like pressure point strikes and joint locks and things of that nature. And you're right, nobody starts off, at white belt level learning how to do intricate pressure point strikes or joint locks. They got to learn how to move first before they ever get into the fine details. But I found too that with like piano, it's almost like people just expect themselves to be, well, if I can play this with my right hand, why can't I get my fingers on my left hand to move? And it's like, because you're working with fine motor details. And so it's like, sometimes I tell them, look, if you can just get your hand in the right position and just practice moving your hand from this position to this position to that position, that's actually doing something in your brain that's beneficial later when you get into the more micro
Mm.
movements. Wouldn't you? Don't you kind of find that to be true too?
Yeah, I mean, so doing the macro movements correctly, that's going to build a good foundation so that when you do get to micro, because
Mm-hmm.
micro honestly should be macro adjusted.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So if you like, people come to me and they're like, I want to do only knife, and they don't
Right.
do the stick, which is the macro stuff. And if you don't do that, then I find that even if you do get down those intricate movements, you're very limited, and I don't think it's very effective.
Yeah. Well, when I first started with FMA, of course, it was coming from several other martial arts, and I had been an instructor with nunchucks, at one of my schools, and nunchucks is definitely what I would consider much more micro movements because you do have the big swings, but you've got a lot of wrist stuff that you're doing with the
Right.
nunchucks, so it's kind of like when I got into the FMA and I started learning the big stick movements, I was like, I think several of the martial arts I studied kind of glossed over the big movements
Okay.
way too much.
Mm.
Like they should have spent more time on the big stuff rather than moving right into the little. Like I like Cook Sool, it was a really good martial art, but we jumped right in from like white belt level learning intricate joint locks and things like that I'm not so sure that, or maybe they did that for me because I had come from a martial arts background, but it just seemed like they progressed really fast to jump right into the joint locks,
Okay.
which I think that spending a little bit more time on the big movements might have been more useful maybe.
Mm. Mm. My Cook Sool experience was a little different. So
Oh yeah.
we start off like simple wrist releases, wrist escapes,
Mm-hmm.
and those lead into some joint locks, counter joint locks and stuff. But
Okay.
we start out. That's pretty basic, right? Most martial.
I would
Yeah.
think so,
Yeah.
yeah.
A wrist release. Yeah. So we
That kind of stuff you kind of need that
yeah.
right off the bat because the first, if somebody's not throwing a punch at you, they're probably grabbing
Right.
your arm or something, and so it's like those are the kind of things that you really ought to learn, right off the bat. I'm not really sure why my teacher focused so much on the joint locks when we were in. I should text him. I think he's still around and ask him, what.
He was probably doing that at the time, so that's what he's excited about. So he wants to show you guys that, probably.
That really could be
Just
because
a
he
guess.
was actually working on his next belt level.
Oh,
So it's like that definitely could have been it.
yeah.
But I remember my first time going into his class. I mean, I had been doing martial arts for at least 10 years at that point.
Okay.
And I went in with my girlfriend at the time. I was in college. And she was like, I walked in and I saw this little short fat guy behind the desk, and I was looking around and he's like, "Can I help you?" And I said, "Oh, I was just checking out, what kind of school this was." And she was like, he's like, "Oh, well, come on out to the mat." And I was like, "No, I'm not interested." And my girlfriend's like, "Well, why don't you just go and see what he's got to show you?" And I was like, "All right." So I go out to the mat and we're kind of circling around each other, and he's like, "Go ahead and attack me." I was like, "No." I was like, that's the first rule is like, if I attack first, I've already lost the battle. And he was like, "Well, that's good advice, but go ahead and attack me anyway." I was like, "All right." I don't know what I did, but the next thing I know, I'm on my butt trying to figure out how I got there. And I was like, "All right, I'll sign up for lessons."
Well, now, do you think that's become rare today, where instructors do that?
I don't know. I think probably because of the insurance laws.
Insurance law.
I think about that. If somebody walks right off the street and you throw them on the mat, there's a good chance if you don't know that person that they're going to be like, "I hurt my tailbone, so I'm suing now."
Yeah.
But back in the 90s or whatever, it was like you were looking for a teacher that could, and that's the way martial arts traditionally was.
Right.
Like you would look for the teacher that knew more than you so that you could learn something, and that's why you had the duels and the different showdowns and things like that they had in the old days, like Musashi and things like that.
Mm.
You can't do that anymore. In fact, you can't even teach half the stuff that a person really needs to survive anymore because of all the insurance regulations
Mm.
that there are. That's my thinking on it. But have you ever watched? I can't remember the guy's channel, but he's from South Carolina and he's a retired police officer that has a martial arts school somewhere. I think it's in Charleston or Myrtle Beach or somewhere.
Okay.
And he has a pretty big YouTube channel. He's a real little bald guy that he looks like he's nothing but muscle. Have you know who I'm talking about at all?
Um, is the American guy?
Yeah, he's an American guy.
Okay, and is very muscular, bald. What style?
It's weird. It's like just a mix of everything.
Um,
Like and he has like lots of the famous YouTube martial artists end up going to visit him and doing channel or episodes with him.
did he compete in that backyard brawl thing?
Oh, maybe. Yeah, I think he did.
Okay, I think I know who you're talking.
You think you know what I'm talking about? That guy, he hit everything that I've ever seen him talk about was I want to cut off the fat. You know, I don't care about any particular style. I just want to get down to this will save your life in a fight, and it's basically. And then he also does a lot of talking about the legalities of what you're allowed to do because he was a cop.
Mm.
You know, so it's like he gets right down to the point, and it's like, you know, I think he's kind of got the old spirit, you know, of what it used to be like, and but I find like here in my town, I would say probably from what I understand, I haven't visited their school yet, but the Krav Maga school, they seem to be pretty, you know, focused on actual real world techniques. But a lot of the other schools, like the cook or the Taekwondo classes, and there's a Kung Fu academy that I mean I don't from what I read on that guy's page, it's like all he cares about is meditation and stuff. It's like I don't see that he wants to teach anybody how to fight at all, you know. And then the Tiger Kim's or Taekwondo Academy, they're all mostly geared towards tournaments
Right.
and basically taking the kids up through all of the activities. And it's like, but the place that the police in town all go seem to be the Krav Maga. And I have found that if you really want to learn like serious survival fighting, find out where the cops go to train. And you know, if you can find out where they're training, it's probably a good school. And that's why I was going to the Cook Silwan school too, because when I found out that there were so many police that trained there, I was like, okay, well, this is actually useful stuff, you know. And at the time too, they talked a lot about, and I don't, the laws probably have changed because this is 30 years ago, but they talked a lot about the legality of a wrist lock, you know, as opposed to just shattering somebody's arm with like a, you know, a really hard block, you know, like you do in Taekwondo. And they're like, you're much safer in front of the judge if you just put somebody in a lock and waited till the cops got there than if you just shattered somebody's arm or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But you can do a lot of damage with a wrist lock too that a lot of people don't seem to know. But
Yeah. But you know, I guess breaking someone's wrist just doesn't seem as bad as their
yeah,
or their shoulder
right.
or their knee.
My one of my buddies, he's a detective in my hometown, and his father-in-law is a former Navy SEAL, and he studied taijutsu in Japan for years. And there's the onigaki move is one of their moves, and he said in one move you basically break their collarbone, dislocate their shoulder, break their rib, and dislocate their hip and break their knee, all in one locking move that you do. And I was like, yeah, I don't think the next time you arrest somebody, you want to be pulling something like that because they're going to kick you off the force pretty fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's like, whatever. I don't know. So we've talked a lot about, you know, martial arts and martial art techniques, but I found when I discovered FMA, I just felt like the way that you learn the everything in FMA just seems to fit my learning style a lot better than a lot of the other martial arts that I've studied. And I remember struggling, like I had a really hard time learning katas. It's like I could never keep which and on the other side of that, my wife and I are doing dance, like learning ballroom dancing stuff.
Oh, no.
And man, I can't keep the footwork for the ballroom dance stuff. It's like it always wants to get backwards in my mind, and I feel like this is just like learning a kata. It like takes
Yeah.
me 4 times longer than my wife to learn, something like this. But there's something about FMA that it's like it pretty much has been boiled down to these are the basic moves and how to add on to them. I don't know, what did you think? Because you've studied a lot of other martial arts too.
Same boat as you. A lot of the kata, the forms is
Mm-hmm.
it don't stick for me. It's too
Yeah,
complex, too long. Just not for me.
yeah.
For some people it works. For me, I like it short and sweet, and a lot of FMA is short and sweet.
Well, when I first, my introduction to FMA, I told you this before, was you.
Oh,
So it was like when I saw your first video on Heaven 6, when I was working on my book about that I was going to do, I haven't done it, but on dual weapon wielding in historical context, I found your videos and I was like, dude, what this guy is doing, this looks like I could do this really easily and it would stick in my head.
mm,
And it was like once I learned Heaven 6, it made sense. And then I learned I think it was the reverse Heaven 6, and then I learned the tornado. Adding a tornado cut was the next thing that I learned,
yeah,
and then I went into the figure eights and some of the other, and it just kind of grew and grew and grew, and I was like, this is such a beautiful. It kind of the way that I likened it in my head was it was kind of like the Boy Scouts for martial arts. It's like you work on whatever you want to work on and you get your badge in that
okay,
and you add it to the core of
mm,
what you learned. And I was like, this is what FMA seems like. Maybe not at a sport level, because I don't know anything about the sporting aspect of FMA, but just the teaching concept of you learn a basic thing and then you build off of that basic thing by adding things that work in conjunction with it.
right.
And I try to teach my music students that way too with music.
Oh,
Like I'll say, look, these are the basic chords that you need to learn. And like the first thing that I ever teach, like my guitar students especially, first song I ever teach them is Hotel California by the Eagles.
really?
Yeah, and the reason I do that is I don't teach it to them in the key it's recorded in. I teach it a full step down because if you learn it a full step down, you learn enough chords in that song that you can play in 3 different keys.
Wow.
And so it's kind of like, and then if you add, like, really, there are 3 songs that a person needs to learn. If they learn Hotel California, Little Wing by Jimi Hendrix, and Your Song by Elton John, and in Hotel California in both of the original key and the key that I start with, you will literally learn all the chords you're ever going to need to learn for any song just
Wow.
by learning those 3 songs.
Right. Right.
So it's like a lot of books, like music books, when you open them up, they start off with here, learn how to read this line and learn how to read this note and learn how to do this, and they're building you up to the point to where you could sit down and open up a Bach sonata and play it. But the point is, nobody nowadays, or at least I've out of the 30 some years that I've been teaching, I've only had maybe a handful of people come to me that actually wanted to learn a Bach sonata. Everybody wants to play pop and rock and roll and
Right.
blues and
Of course.
stuff like that. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, you're not going to get there. It's going to take you 4 years if you use the classical method just to where you can start to understand what the blues guys and the rock guys are doing.
Right.
Or I can start you right now and teach you what the blues guys and the rock guys are doing, but you're not necessarily going to be able to read
Right.
music yet.
Right.
And I always tell people, if you get to the point where you want, I mean, I've got a degree in music, but I never read music anymore. It's like the last time I ever read a score was for a wedding, and that was, gosh, 15 years ago, 16 years ago. And it's like, I almost never need music, and I'm a professional musician.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, mostly what I need is just give me the key, and I know how the guitar works, I know how the piano works, and I can just make up what needs to be there, or I can listen if you want me to copy something, and I can copy
Right.
what's there.
Right.
Because I've learned enough about the fundamentals of how music works and how to apply that on my instrument. And I feel like martial arts is kind of the same thing. It's like you need to learn what your instrument is. And if your instrument is the sticks, then when you take the sticks away, it's like, well, I've got a new instrument. It's my hands.
Right.
But the Heaven 6 works with the hands and the knife, the crambit or whatever. The Heaven
Right.
6 is going to work. It's just such a beautiful, simplistic, but not overly, not ineffective. It's simplistic, but not ineffective system. And that's what I love about it.
Same, same. I want to ask you about so you said you want to write a book on dual-handed weapon.
Yeah, the history of it.
Um, so like at some point, probably ancient people had to use a spear, right? Most base,
Yep.
right? Hunting mammoths, saber-toothed tigers, they had a
Yeah,
spear.
makes
Right?
sense.
Used it in battlefield too. Went from the spear to where maybe you start having two things, right? Maybe a shield and a spear, or a
Yep.
glove and a shield, or so when do you think they started going into that separation? Because
Well, I
yeah,
think even before the shield and the spear, what probably happened is, let's say you're out there attacking the mammoth, okay? And the mammoth is about to step on you, and you're like, ah, and you put your spear up, and he cracks the spear in half, and you're like, well, now what do I do? And you have to, bat away and just da 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 da. And think about this: those same tribes that were hunting the mammoth were also playing drums. And drums, you've got two things, and you're learning intricate beats and things like that. And maybe this is just me thinking this, but I really think that if you look at the history of warfare and music, they're tightly interconnected with each other, because they used a lot of music as signals on the battlefield of how to go left or to go right. They used their drums for different tribes all over the world would use drums to basically gear you up to go into battle, and then you would use drums while you're in the battle. I would imagine that the first time they used drums when they were hunting the mammoth, it probably scared the mammoth and confused him, and then that made him easier to attack. And so I think the dual weapon stuff, in my opinion, probably goes all the way back to even before shields were invented. I mean, I could be totally wrong about that, but it just seems to make some sense to me.
yeah, and also a shield is a lot more complex than,
Mm-hmm.
like you're saying, two broken sticks.
Yeah.
That's bound to happen. And when it does happen, it's just like in the movies. You see, like Steven Seagal, with a
Yeah, they snap the pool stick in half.
yeah, and then now he has two, and so if you don't have dual wielding, then you just lost your weapon. So it just
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. Yeah.
Well, and I think a good example of that is, well, the Steven Seagal thing, Jackie Chan does it, or the
Mm.
classic one is the fight scene in Phantom Menace when you've got
Oh,
the, what's his name, Darth Maul,
yeah.
and they cut his lightsaber in half, and then he just goes into, it looked like a Heaven 6 kind of combo
Mm.
that he was doing in
Mhm.
that one. And it's like, bound to happen if you're using any kind of a pole arm weapon, and I think you're right. The At some point somebody said, I don't want to get too close to this alligator, so I'm going to put something sharp on the end of this stick so I can poke him in the head,
Right.
and maybe he won't whack me with the tail and knock me down.
Right.
I mean, it just makes perfect sense. And then, like, if you look at the development of, like, Chinese weapons, it's almost like a balance between there's some kind of a attacking weapon on this end, and there's an equally lethal attacking weapon on that end.
That's
And they may do the same thing or they may do different things,
right.
depending on what the weapon is, but they're very balanced. Like, I was talking to Sifu Cuddle. I don't know if you've ever watched any of his videos, but you might like him. He's a kung fu teacher from he's from California originally, but he lives in Switzerland. And we were talking about the development of Chinese weapons.
Yeah.
And I asked him about, like, why is it that a lot of the weapons in the movies look flimsy? And he kind of laughed and he said that was a response to the communist government. He was like, they weren't allowed to have weapons, and so when they'd make the movies, they would have all these floppy, crappy weapons. But he said the real weapons are actually pretty substantial.
They're solid. Yeah.
Yeah, they're solid weapons.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I was trying to come up with a reasoning like maybe all Chinese weapons were really thin and they liked the whip kind of an action. And so in my head, I was thinking maybe that's the reason, because it's like you got a big long razor blade flying at you and maybe that's effective, or it would suck to get hit by that.
Yeah.
But he said, no, that's not the history of it.
No.
The history is they had pretty solid weapons.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like some genius came up with the idea of let's put two weapons on each end, which you don't see that much in European, pole arms. And I think the reason is probably because of horses. Like, you had a lot more cavalry work, I think, in Europe because there's a lot more flatter plains.
Right.
And so the idea is let's take the pole arm, shove it in the ground, with like a heavy, blunt end, so that way if a horse hits it, it's going to take the horse down.
Right.
And that's just kind of from my study of the different development of weapons. I think that's why there's a difference, whereas pole arms in the East were often carried by the foot soldiers.
Mm. And like you were saying, so if it does break and now you have two, then having like basically one-handed weapons in both arms, right? That's pretty significant, because if we're assuming right, and that came before Sword and Shield,
Mm-hmm.
then that's very interesting, because from there you have something that is two offensive weapons, and then at some point they decided, let's go offense and defense. Let's balance it out, because in the battlefield maybe anything could happen. So want to be adaptable.
Well, one of the things that I studied too was the first conscripted army that we have on record, and was, I believe, the Persian army.
Okay.
And by conscripted, they didn't have any like serious training. It was just, okay, you guys were taking 10 men from this town, 10 men from this town, and they weren't trained to fight as a unit. It was like, well, you guys from this village, you fight the way that you fight, and we'll send you in when we need to, and you guys from this village, we'll send you in. And even though it was a comic style, I think that movie The 300 kind of demonstrates that. When the Persians got to the pass and the Spartans had the pass blocked off, they would send in different characters, and it was overblown and theatrical, but that's really how the Persian army worked, and it wasn't really until Sparta started it, and then Alexander the Great kind of used it a little bit more, but the Romans really perfected the idea of now we're going to have a locked group of men, with our shields all together and make like a shield formation, and we're just going to march through a horde of people and cut them down. And it's like that's when the shield became almost an offensive weapon too,
Hmm.
because it's like a tank in that case.
Right.
You're making a tank of people and you're sending them in, and but before that it was kind of chaotic.
And yeah, because in that chaos, I could imagine. So like if you and I were in there, and we're facing them, I'm gonna say, hey, bro, let's team up and
Yeah,
let's flank this guy. So
yeah,
we're gonna spear this guy from the side, this one guy. So it'll be 2-on-1. Let's keep doing that.
yeah.
But so how do you defend against that? If a lot of then the tank makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Well, and I also read, this is a little bit of a different thing, but I think this is what it's saying. There's a passage in the Bible where there was a battle, and it said that the Benjamites, which was one of the tribes of Israel, came up, and it said that each man could sling a stone within a hairbreadth of whatever they were aiming at, and they could do it left-handed and right-handed. And it's like that's slingers, that they're slinging a stone. They got this one ready. They sling that, and then they load up both of them, and they're going again. That again is another example of the dual weapon style, and it's like, man, and that's where David came from. So when he went up against Goliath, it's like, well, dude, he was trained by the best sling people in the world, that could fight with slings with both hands. It's like, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And then the archaeologists have found the sling balls from around that area,
Yeah.
and they were about the size of like a golf ball, but they're made out of rocks and they're polished.
Right.
So they're really polished stones. And they said that when they would launch a sling bullet, it had the same velocity and impact as a 22 rifle bullet. And I'm like, can you imagine getting hit with a slug like that?
No.
It's like you're getting. I mean, if you shoot somebody with a 22, it's going to go into them.
Mm-mm.
It may not go out the other side, but like if you hit somebody with a ball that a golf ball size,
Yeah.
and you hit them with that impact, they're not getting back up from that.
Mm-mm.
you know.
I and I heard from a buddy, and I believe he was referring to Japanese warfare, ancient warfare. So I don't know how true
Mm-hmm.
it is for the world, but I'm guessing that it's probably pretty similar. Is that I guess once arrows and like projectile weapons,
Came on the field.
yeah, he's saying that most of the deaths actually probably came more from that than we're gonna do.
Yep. Well, I know that's the truth at the Battle of Agincourt in when the English were going up against the French, and that's where the middle finger came from. So like what would happen is the French were getting decimated, and they were like, we're nobles and we've got the best knights and we've got the best armor, and they would go out and charge, and the English longbowmen would just cut them down, with their bows. And so the prince or the king or whoever he was at the battle said, listen, I'm going to give a bounty on every English longbowman you can catch. And so in the night, they would start going out into the camps and abducting these longbowmen, and they would cut their middle finger off and bring it back to the king to get their bounty. And so whenever they were out on the field, the English longbowmen that still had their middle finger would flip the French off to say, I still got my middle finger, so I can still draw my bow
Right.
and shoot you. But I saw a documentary too where they showed that the longbowmen, the arm that they held the bow with was significantly shorter than the other arm, from all of the stress that was
Right.
how much weight that longbow could pull back.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're absolutely right. Once arrows became a thing, or slings, it's like you've got a whole different system, and you need a shield, Because how are you going to protect? I mean, yeah, you could be awesome and whack the arrows out, but you're always looking up there while somebody's coming at you this way.
Right.
It's just easier to put a shield up and run forward,
Right.
I think.
So then the battle before the bows and stuff. So now we're talking about we're back to spears, but then they were throwing spears,
Yeah, that's what the atlatl is. I mean, the
right?
atlatl's that spear device that hurls the spear like twice as long as a person can throw it.
And like you're saying with the David and Goliath, those slings were there forever, right?
Yep,
So how
yep.
far back do we have to go to where?
Oh, a long way back, and I wonder. Like, I think about who came up with the first spear and decided to throw it. Who came up with the first stone? I think I have an idea about it. I was watching a video about the Neanderthal and how that the at one point in time they know that humanity, like Homo sapiens, had gotten down to where it was only like 20 or 30 people.
That's right.
And they were like, dude, they're going to be wiped out. But somehow we figured out a way to kill off the Neanderthal, and then we came back from that really close, almost extinction event.
Wasn't it like climate change or something? They got wiped.
I think that had a lot to do with it.
It wasn't that we beat them, you know.
No, but
We,
at some point, I think we probably had to have because it. Okay, so in my other show, the Hidden Citadel, we literally talked about this week. We were talking about the the stories of ogres and trolls and things like that.
yeah,
And we're like, what if you had a Neanderthal living in a cave at the edge of your village, and you tell your children don't go up there. One of the things that the Resurrectionists did a show on this recently too about the origin of trolls, and she was like, well, we've got evidence that that not trolls, but that Neanderthals ate people. They were cannibals, or not cannibals of their own Neanderthal type, but they would eat people.
right.
And so it's like if you're telling your kid, hey, don't go up on that mountain and play because there's a creature that lives up there that will eat you. And it's like if the people of the village are like, you know what, we got that guy's the thing about a Neanderthal is they were faster than us, they had a bigger brain than us, and they were stronger than us. But apparently, even though they had a bigger brain, it didn't necessarily mean that they were more inventive than us because we adapted to using tools a lot quicker than they did.
Right.
And so it's like, well, maybe some wise person in a village said, that guy is faster than me and bigger than me. If I can stand from back here and hit him with a rock, you know, maybe I'm going to do more damage and keep him at bay before he can get in close and rip me in half, you know?
Yeah, and it could really be in our DNA since like there are primates like gorillas and stuff that
Hmm.
they throw poop,
That's true.
right?
I've had that happen at the zoo. I know that from experience.
So, I mean, you could throw, bacteria at them, but you could also
Yeah.
go, hey, you know what? I'm going to throw a rock.
Yeah.
So,
Definitely.
yeah,
Well,
I guess,
and they also
yeah.
have monkeys. I think it's gorillas will use like sticks to like dig into ant mounds,
Oh,
and then they pull out the stick and it's covered with ants, and they lick it off like a lollipop.
right,
Like, and that's how they get food. And it's like, well, that's a primitive use of a tool right there.
right,
And if somebody was doing that, it's like it's just it's a very short leap to say, if I stick this into this guy's chest, you know, rather than into the ant mound,
right,
maybe he's not going to come back and fight me, you
right,
know?
right. So, yeah, no, I think both of those went hand in hand, literally. But then at some point, yeah, oh man, those bow and arrows really started to change the game. And then, of course, now we have firearms, which is
Yeah.
completely
I've
changed the game.
Have you done a lot of research on the introduction of firearms to Japan and the Japanese battles and all that?
No, I mean just what I learned in a history class over there. But
Man, I'm telling you, I've studied that, and so apparently the Portuguese wrecked a ship, and then they ended up finding the firearms, and they already knew about fireworks,
yeah,
because the Japanese were close to the Chinese, and they'd been trading, anyway, so they knew how to make the powder, and it was like the light bulb went off. Hey, wait a minute, yeah, we could point this at somebody, and so it was like, was it Sekigahara that was the first battle with firearms,
was it
or
Gahara? It, it could have even been before because
maybe before?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
but it was like that first battle when they went out there, and then I remember reading about how there was a big debate after that battle, and they were like, "Is this actually an honorable thing to do?" And whoever the shogun was or the one of the daimyo was like, I don't care if it's honorable or not, we're going to use it, because it'll give us an
It
advantage.
was probably Nobunaga. He was really into, he was open to stuff like
Y-
that. Yeah.
yeah, that was. Have you'd asked me about a game before, but I remember when I was a kid playing Nobunaga's Ambition
No.
on the Nintendo.
Yes.
That was my introduction to Japanese history, and that was like, so my college is the number 5 at the time. I don't know if it still is, but when I was in school, it was the number 5 college in the world outside of Japan for Japanese studies.
Oh, wow.
So it was like, yeah, you could not get out of that college without learning something about Japan. So I ended up taking a year of Japanese. I took a Japanese music class and like the ancient music of Japan that talked about the development of kabuki and the no theater and all that stuff. And then there was a couple other Japanese flavored classes because I can't remember the guy's name, but the guy that was kind of the head of the Japanese department there is at the time was like world famous for being one of the best Anglo experts on Japanese culture,
Wow.
and so yeah, he was like a tenured professor there, and so we had a Japanese garden at the school, and it was cool. I mean, I really got into the history of
What was this?
all that stuff.
Uh,
Earlham College in
we're
Richmond, Indiana.
Indiana. Indiana.
Yeah, yeah, I know.
Wow.
Nobody would think Indiana would have that, but yeah. But Earlham's really gone downhill since I graduated. Like at the time, it was a really top tier school, and then they got a series of like 5 or 6 crappy presidents that just did not do things right, and so the school just kind of dropped off the map, and I think it's coming back. I heard, but it really lost a lot of its status.
Mm.
It was because I left, but no, that's not true. Actually, I went to college with the guy that played Dexter.
What?
Um, yeah, he was a couple years ahead of me
Wow.
at Earlham. So that's Earlham's claim to fame that they don't like because they're a Quaker school and they were like, we don't want to be associated with that TV
It
show.
it's not Ivy League, is it?
It was
It
at the
was.
time,
It
but
was.
it's not anymore.
Wow.
And I got in because I lived there. It was like that was my hometown. And so it was kind of like I was one of they called me the token local.
Oh.
It's like, but I mean, I had good grades and everything. So it's like I didn't,
And
I earned my way in, but it was,
and you trained there, right?
yeah, that's where I was doing Taekwondo at that school, and then but I also off campus would do other martial arts with different people,
Did did
and then when I got out I still kept training.
did your Kuksu one offer like mine? They also taught old school Taekwondo, but like old school, not Olympic.
Yeah, I think they kind of combined it. They never said
Yeah.
this is. But what my teacher told me is he was like, before Taekwondo existed, there was it Hapkido, and he said Kuksulwan is basically a continuation of Hapkido, and so he just said this predates Taekwondo.
Mm.
And so that's how he taught it to us. But I didn't know if it was a separate martial art. I got the feeling from the little that I studied about the history of it that Kuksul Wan was almost like a response to Taekwondo. Like they were like, no, we don't want to be a sport. We want to be a martial art still. And it became like adopted by the police department in Korea. And then that's where Kuksulwan grew from. But I could be wrong about that. But that's the teacher gave me a book, and I remember reading something about that
Okay.
in the book, and I was like, I don't know. What do you know about it? I mean,
My instructor said that it is a royal martial art. So
they said that too.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So in that sense, I mean, it was taught, by the elite. You know,
that's why it became the police department's martial art of choice, I guess,
mm.
because if it was what the guards needed to learn to protect the king, then it would later on down the road become, when police departments and things like that. It makes sense.
I'm thinking Hapkido and Taekwondo were definitely separate, and those were I don't want to
Okay.
say commoner styles, but those were more common and taught to everybody.
Okay.
Whereas the Kuksulwan was not original.
Do you think that they had a lot of similar?
Oh,
Because it seemed to me there's so many
yeah,
similarities between
absolutely.
them.
At least now, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we can know what the original Kuksulwan looked like. I mean, maybe some historian in Korea might know, but
It
I mean,
seems like you go far back enough with Korea, it starts to look like Shaolin.
oh yeah, I can believe that. That
Yeah,
makes a lot of sense.
yeah.
And where would they have learned it from other than the monks, traveling, and they would have taught Shaolin, and then it would have eventually morphed into something else. I mean, martial arts is a lot like language. Um, if you, my wife and I like to watch a lot of the British detective shows,
Okay.
and they'll sit there and say things, and we're like, what on earth does that mean? It's like that's not the kind of
Mhm.
phrase that we would use in America.
Did you
And
guys watch Taboo?
no, I haven't heard of that. What is that?
It's British, but it's historical. And who's the actor that played Bane in Batman?
Oh yeah,
Max.
I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, that guy is the main character, and
Okay.
in
He's a good actor. Thomas something, right?
gosh,
Or
he played Venom, he played Mad Max.
yeah,
Um,
that guy's an awesome actor.
awesome actor. That dude. I think he even produced this TV show.
So it's called Taboo.
Yeah, it's called Taboo, and it takes place, back in the day where the East India Trading Company,
Oh, okay.
and he comes back from Africa. So to me, that is a connection with the original story of Apocalypse Now. I feel like maybe I'm just making
Oh yeah, yeah.
right.
Definitely.
Uh,
It's like a an older the
yes,
next yeah
yeah, the Heart of
previous
Darkness. The original story wasn't it East Africa Trade?
yeah it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
yeah
So this guy comes back from that. So I kind of feel like he survived that, came back.
yeah he had to fight his way out.
So he has a lot of darkness in him, and then now he's here to get revenge
Oh wow.
back in the UK, and one of his favorite weapons of choice is a karambit,
Oh, there you go.
and that's because he encountered like Indonesian martial arts people and stuff on his journey, and
That's cool.
I guess those guys were assassins
Well, maybe they might have worked as assassins for somebody.
around the
Um,
world, and
are were a lot of the Indonesian weapons real similar to the Filipino weapons too? I guess.
I don't think Well, I mean, other than
Because like a karambit's definitely Filipino, right?
no,
Oh, it's not.
no,
Okay.
no, no. Karambit is an Indonesian, yeah. And from my understanding,
Oh.
what Professor Bram Frank told me was that in the Philippines they call it a sangut,
Uh huh.
and basically it's the same idea. Also in Japan we have a kama, which is the same,
Yeah. Yeah. Same kind of
but
thing.
they all
Yep.
look very different from each other.
Okay.
And the Filipino sangut is the closest thing to a karambit, from my understanding. And you know, the only connection would be is honestly probably Professor Danny Nosanto teaching Silat with FMA together.
Yeah.
So that's really,
Well,
yeah.
so did like the karambit start out bigger then, and then it came down to like, isn't that the knife with the loop that you?
Yes,
That's a karambit.
yes.
But was there a bigger version that they would like use as like a harvesting tool?
I don't. In Indonesia, they may have, but when it was adopted as for Silat, they look pretty small to me.
Okay.
And in fact,
Huh.
in the books, I like history books, I see like a double-sided blade, like
Oh, okay.
small blade up here, and then the main blade, the tiger's.
Oh, yes, I've seen those.
Yeah. So, I don't know how
That makes
later
sense.
that came.
Well, somebody brought it over. I remember watching Forged in Fire and Doug Marcaida talking about when they did the Crambit episode. He was like, "This is the pride of the Philippines," or he said something like that, and then took the towel off, and it was, a pair of Crambit.
Mhm.
And I'm like, maybe to him because he's Filipino, maybe he's like, this is, what. And he try. I'm follow him on Instagram, and he does a lot of videos on Crambit, use and stuff. But
Yeah, I think for the Filipinos, it would be the Bali song. That
that's what I thought. He does a few Bali song videos too, but he doesn't use it as much.
I think this is his modern own personal take.
Yeah, maybe,
Yeah,
or it may be that his teacher really liked it and he learned it from him. And but like, it seems like a lot of FMA people use karambits a lot. That other guy at the Cali Center, what's his name? Uh, I can't remember his name, but he does a lot of YouTube videos, and he uses karambit a lot too. Maybe it's just a certain school of the FMA has kind of adapted it, and
I think it's a modern phenomenon. Like it's because
okay,
the karambit's popular, and like I said, Professor Daniel Santo taught Silat with Penchat Silat
okay.
with FMA.
Well,
So
maybe that's where, yeah, he
yeah,
might have brought it in
yeah,
then.
I think so. But originally, like in my FMA, I we never touched,
Never used them, huh?
never. Yeah.
When with I watched the one, I think it was his TED talk. It was Dan Inosanto's TED talk where he talked about the history of the Filipino soldiers and how every Spanish galleon would have at least a handful of Filipino soldiers on there because they were so good at using both hands, which if you're just a normal sailor is really useful because if you got to tie down this rope over here and tie off a rope here, that's a useful skill to have.
Right.
And then when you get into combat, he was like, that was one the guns that the Spanish ships had and the Filipino soldiers made them a very unstoppable force, and that's why the British had a really hard time because the British had to adopt a lighter ship that could outmaneuver the Spanish galleons, and that was the only way that the British were able to really beat them because they couldn't beat them in a fair fight if there was like a boarding situation a lot of times.
So if the Spanish had Filipino, soldiers on there, I think we could assume that other countries may have also had other, Southeast Eastern Asian soldiers,
They would have had to have.
or
Yeah.
or just a helper. Like you know how like you watch Moby Dick or something, and then there's that
Yep.
harpoonist that he looks like he's African or something.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, so kind of like that. You had one helper that was, this guy's mega skilled at something.
Yeah.
So they could have had an Indonesian like assassin, Silat.
Oh, easily.
Yeah.
I wrote a book, oh, been about 6 or 7 years ago. It was called, it was a pirate sea shanty book for the mandolin. And in the book, I talk a lot about the history of like the golden age of piracy and all that. And one of the things is a lot of the sailing crews of that time were the most cosmopolitan places that because you would find Africans and Arabs and Asians and Europeans and everybody all working together on the crew of a ship because there was the idea that my village or my life sucks. Maybe if I go off to sea, it'll be I'll get a better chance.
Mm.
And the ships were actually governed in a lot of cases by whatever um, rulership the captain kind of came up with. So you had some captains that were like just total authoritarians, and then you had other captains that it was like a complete democracy, and it was just weird how a lot of the vessels worked. And another thing too is like this one pirate that I wrote about, I can't remember his name, but his whole thing was we're not going to have any drinking or gambling or women on the ship. You go to bed at this time and you get up at this time. You're going to make sure you brush your teeth, and all this kind of stuff. And it was like, and every day we're going to have a Bible service. And it was like, what kind of pirate is this?
Wow. Wow.
But he was just like, that was his rules, and
Right.
it's like, and then other pirates were like, well, we do pretty much whatever we want to. And others were like, what was really weird about the golden age of piracy is King George was the third was really going after the Spanish and trying to stop them from growing.
Right.
And he was going at them full hook and tong basically. And so they kept shanghaiing people from all over the coast cities of England and Ireland and Scotland, and you would just be tending your sheep, and these guys would roll up, grab you, and drag you on board the
Oh.
ship, and say, "Guess what? You're in Her Majesty's Navy or His Majesty's Navy now.
Right.
Welcome aboard."
Right.
And this went on for 15, 20 years or whatever until George married off one of his relatives to the King of Spain, one of his relatives, and then they had a peace treaty. And so what happened was the Navy came to him and said, "Well, sir, what are we going to do with all of these crewmen that we've already, turned into sailors? We still have to pay them." And George says, "Oh, give me some parchment. Well, I got a solution. It's real easy." And so he wrote out an edict that if you were a sailor, you were immediately now a pirate, and you were to be hunted down and executed.
Whoa.
And so all of these sea dogs that ended up being pirates started out being Navy guys in the King's own Navy, and because he was a nutcase, he just, changed his mind, and now they were all. And so, like, at the beginning of, like, the Pirates of the Caribbean movie, most of those guys that were getting hanged probably started out as crewmen
Oh.
on real. Well, I mean that's a fake movie, but
Yeah. Yeah.
in real life that happened, and all those guys would have been sailors originally on the British Crown vessels.
And yeah, no, that is crazy, and yeah, that's wild, man.
King George was really, really a weird guy, and he had a mental illness that it showed up in the fact that his pee would turn blue. And so for years, people were like, what on earth was this illness? And then one day he woke up and it was gone. And he wasn't crazy anymore. And it was just like, but for a good 15, 20 years, and there's a movie called The Madness of King George that kind of talks about this whole thing. And the entire American Revolution happened during the time that he was crazy. The other edict that he passed was he said, um, any soldier, we're not going to pay you when you get to the colonies. All the people that live in the colonies are going to pay you instead. And so if you want to eat their food, just go to any old farm you want to and take the food. If you want to rape their daughters, go and just, take their daughters. If you want to just kill the farmers, that's okay. It doesn't matter. If they resist, you have full rights to go in and do anything. So for 10 years, the founding fathers were like sending him letters saying,
What?
this has to stop.
Right.
You can't do
Right.
this. The whole phrase taxation without representation, that was just their catchphrase, but that didn't even cut what he was doing to the people. Like, their taxation was whatever the soldiers feel. And there's an old Irish song called that dates from this time period called Martinmas Time, where these soldiers go up to this farm and there's a cute girl that works on the farm and they're like, oh, you're going to come to the barracks tonight, and if you don't, we're going to kill all your family. And so what she does is she shaves her head, gets a pair of pistols, and she takes a lock of her hair and she rides down to the gate and she says, we got a whole company of men coming in, you guys got to make room for the next company. And they're like, no, we got a woman coming tonight, and she's like, no, you guys got to make room. And so when they basically said, well, here's some money, take the money and go find them a place in town to stay, she was like, okay. And then she tied her hair to the post and rode off with their money. And it turned out that she kept her word. She came to the gate, and so when they came back to get her, it was like, no, she kept her word and you guys missed out, just because she dressed up like a boy or whatever.
Right.
And but that happened a lot. And in America and Ireland, they kept petitioning the king, stop doing this. And that's what basically sparked the Revolutionary War, was after 10 years of him ignoring them, they just said, we've had enough of this and we're done.
Sounds like he was poisoned if he was peeing blue or something.
That's what I'm kind of thinking.
Yeah.
But it lasted for a long time.
Well,
So it's like, I don't know. That's something I need to kind of study a little bit more and find out. But he's definitely a weird and interesting character, but it's because of him that we have the golden age of piracy, and I'm sure that a lot of people were being traded back and forth from pirate ships to Spanish ships to British ships to French. It's like, it sounds like the whole Caribbean, especially Jamaica, was just like constantly changing hands, and New Orleans was like that too. It was always changing hands,
right.
So yeah, I don't know.
Fascinating stuff. Yeah.
I'm glad I don't have to live in that time, because I mean, can you imagine? It would have just been survival of the fittest for your whole life. It's really, really rough.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, this has been a pretty interesting discussion. But I better let you go. But I mean, anything? Why don't you tell the people about how they can find all your stuff and your channels and everything?
Yeah, thank you. It's just youtube.com/WMPYR, Wmpyr, or I just call it Wmpyr. But yeah, so yeah, that's where primarily my stuff is. I don't really do other social media. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, go check him out, because especially if you want to learn to up your game as far as ambidexterity, man, you can't go wrong with FMA techniques.
Well, thanks, man. Yeah.
And your videos are really, really good. And what I like about your videos too is I can tell that when anybody writes in and asks a question, you're right on it. And you try to answer it and help the people, because I feel like you really want people to learn, and you're just not out there trying to make a buck. And I like that about you.
Thank you. Just a guide,
That's it. Well, you guys have a great day, and check back with us, and we'll try to keep more videos like this coming.